What if you've been solving the wrong problem your entire life? I checked every box. The promotion, the house, the relationship I worked for, and I still feel like I'm missing something. I don't even know how to explain it to people. I've heard some version of that message more times than I can count. And every single time, I want to say, Rachel, what you're describing is not a failure. It's a values problem. And it has a name and it has real solutions. Today, we are going to talk about something that most people, most intelligent, hardworking, thoughtful adults, were never actually taught. How to figure out what you actually value. Not what you're supposed to value, yours. And it all starts with understanding yourself, beginning with your values. Let's get into it. If you have ever arrived somewhere you worked hard to reach and felt weirdly empty once you got there, this video is for you. If you've set the same goals repeatedly and can't figure out why they don't stick, this video is for you. And if you have a vague, persistent sense that you are doing your life correctly but not actually living it, I especially want you to stay with me today. Let's start with how goal setting is supposed to work, according to basically every productivity book, life coaching program, and motivational speaker of the last 30 years. You figure out what you want. You reverse engineer it into steps. You work the steps, you get there. You feel good. You pick the next goal. Clean, linear, satisfying on a whiteboard. Except here's what actually happens for a lot of people. You hit the goal. Maybe you're even proud of it for a while. And then there's this specific quiet that sets in. Not depression exactly, not failure, just flatness. And you don't understand why, because you did the thing you were supposed to do. So you set another goal, because that's the only tool you have, and you run the loop again. And if you're being honest with yourself, somewhere around the third or fourth cycle, you start to wonder if maybe you've been solving the wrong problem. Here is the thing nobody tells you. Goals are endpoints. They can be reached and crossed off. Values are something completely different. They are the direction you want to move in, the qualities you want to embody, the kind of person you are working on becoming. And you can never finish a value. That's not a bug. That's the entire point. Here's a concrete example. Let's say you set a goal to call your parents once a week. You can achieve that goal. You can fail it. Now imagine that one of your values is being a present and connected family member. That value organizes hundreds of choices your goal never anticipated. Whether you show up for a birthday, whether you put the phone down at dinner, whether you stay on that call 5 more minutes, even when you're tired. The value is a compass. The goal is just a waypoint. Most of us were taught waypoints. We were never taught how to find the compass. Let me give you some context for where this came from psychologically, because I think understanding the history actually helps it land differently. For most of the history of modern psychology, the primary tools for helping people were about managing problems, reducing anxiety, reducing depression, correcting distorted thinking. These are real and important, but what acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT for short, brought to the field starting in the late 1990s was a different question. Instead of asking, how do we fix what's wrong with this person? ACT asks, what does this person actually care about? And how do we help them live in that direction? That is a genuinely different framing, and it is one with a strong evidence base. ACT is now one of the most well-researched therapeutic approaches in the field, with meta-analyses showing significant effects across a wide range of psychological conditions, not just clinical ones, which means this stuff is relevant to most humans, not just people in a therapist's office. In ACT, values are formally defined as freely chosen, ongoing directional principles. That language matters. Freely chosen means they are yours, not borrowed. Ongoing means they don't expire when you hit a milestone. And directional means they describe the person you are trying to be, not a destination you're trying to reach. The field also makes an important distinction between values and rules. A rule says, I must exercise every day. A value says, I care about treating my body with respect. The rule can be violated and produce guilt. The value can be expressed imperfectly and still provide direction. That distinction is the difference between something that regulates you and something that guides you. Now, here's what the research on values clarification consistently shows. And this is important enough that I want to slow down on it. There is a meaningful difference between knowing what you value and actually living in alignment with it. Studies show that the behavioral part, the actual doing, is what produces the psychological benefit. Let me say that again more plainly. Having a list of beautiful values that you never act on will not meaningfully change how you feel. The clarity has to be followed by behavior. This is not a harsh thing to say. It is actually one of the most useful things I can tell you, because it means the work is not just reflection, it is action. I want to walk you through 4 specific studies, because I think when you see what the research actually shows, it reframes why this matters. First, a 2023 meta-analysis by Tunch and colleagues reviewed 72 separate studies and found a medium to large negative correlation between valued living, that's the technical term for acting in line with your values, and depression, and a small to medium negative correlation with anxiety. In plain terms, people who live more consistently in accordance with what they value are measurably less depressed and less anxious. Not slightly less, meaningfully less. This is not a subtle effect. Second, another 2023 meta-analysis, this one by Borum and Schutte, analyzed 99 samples involving more than 66,000 people and found that having a sense of purpose in life, which is the natural downstream product of values clarity, was associated with substantially lower depression and substantially lower anxiety across healthy populations and clinical ones alike. A correlation of negative 0.49 with depression is not a small number. To put it in context, that is comparable to some clinical interventions. The relationship between knowing what your life is about and how well you feel psychologically is not minor. It is one of the most consistent and large effects in the entire mental health literature. Third, a 2024 diary study by Hanel and colleagues followed 184 people across 9 days in India, Turkey, and the UK, and found that on days when people fulfilled their self-direction values, autonomy, independence, creativity, they reported meaningfully improved well-being the following day. And this held across all 3 very different cultures. That's important because it suggests this is not culturally specific. Values alignment appears to be a feature of human psychology across contexts, not a Western concept. And fourth, this one is the one I want you to really sit with. A study by Gregoire and colleagues tracked 97 people over 21 days with end-of-day diary entries and found something particularly interesting. It wasn't just that acting on values was beneficial. Inconsistency, great variability in day-to-day values-aligned behavior was associated with steepening increases in distress over time. Drift is not neutral. The gap between your values and your daily life accumulates a cost over time, which means that identifying your values but not acting on them is not just less helpful. It may actually be actively counterproductive if it creates a persistent awareness of the gap without a path to close it. I want to tell you about Karen. Karen is 47 years old, a director at a mid-sized nonprofit, a mother of 2 teenagers, and by every external measure, she has done everything right. She has the title she spent 15 years working toward. Her kids are doing fine. Her house, the one she and her husband renovated together, room by room, over a decade, is exactly the house she pictured. She achieved all of it. And she found herself awake at 3 in the morning, 2 Tuesdays in a row, scrolling through job listings she had no intention of applying for. Not looking for something better, just looking. When she described this to a therapist, she said she felt like she was doing her life correctly, but not actually living it. That phrase stuck with me because I hear it often in one form or another. It is the language of someone who built the right structure around the wrong values. In session, Karen did 2 exercises, something like the deathbed test, asking herself what she would regret not having been, not what she would regret not having achieved, and a memory scan, looking back through her peak experiences. What Karen found surprised her. None of her peak experiences had anything to do with her career trajectory. They were all moments of deep, unhurried creative work. The value that emerged was specific, creative expression done without an audience or a performance metric. Her career had been built in service of other real values: contribution, stability, accomplishment. All of those were genuine. But the creative expression value was being starved completely. Not because she had failed, because nobody had told her it needed to be there. She wasn't in the wrong life. She was missing one piece of it. She rejoined the writing group. 3 hours a week. The hollowness, to her considerable surprise, began to diminish. Not because her career changed, not because she figured everything out, but because she started feeding a value that had been invisible and ignored for years. That is how this works in practice. Not dramatic reinvention. One piece of truth acted on. All right, I promised you the honest version, so here it is. Values clarification is not a magic fix. It is not a 30-minute journaling exercise you do once and then check off. Some of the most meaningful values work I've seen people do has taken months, not because it requires constant effort, but because some values are buried under a lot of inherited ideas about what a good life looks like, and those take time to move. There is also a version of this that can feel uncomfortable in a way that people sometimes mistake for the work being wrong. When you clarify your values and start comparing them to how you actually spend your time, your job, your relationships, your routines, you may find a significant gap. That gap is real, and it can hurt to see it clearly. That discomfort is not a reason to stop. It is the signal that you're doing the right work. The alternative, never looking, staying comfortable in the ambiguity, is what the research describes as the drift that accumulates cost over time. Here is the other honest thing. Discovering your values does not automatically make your life easier. It makes it more legible. You will know more clearly what you are choosing and what you are sacrificing. Some of those choices will be genuinely hard. Values can conflict with each other. Honoring one sometimes means disappointing another. That is not a flaw in the process. It is a feature of being a complex human with a complex life. What values clarity does is give you a framework for making those hard choices with more intention and less noise. It trades anxiety about whether you're living the right life for the harder but more grounded work of actually deciding what that means for you. Okay, 5 practical strategies, all grounded in research. These are tools, not homework. Use whatever feels most useful to you. Strategy 1, the deathbed test. This one cuts straight through the noise. Write the following sentence at the top of a blank page. At the end of my life, what will I regret not having been or done? Not what I achieved, but who I was. Set a timer for 10 minutes and write without editing. Do not censor the answers that feel too small, too obvious, or embarrassingly idealistic. The goal is not a polished value statement. The goal is the unguarded version of what you actually care about. When you review what you've written, circle any words that describe a quality or a way of being rather than an achievement. Honest, present, creative, brave, curious, connected. Those circled words are the beginning of your values list. They don't have to be profound, they have to be yours. Strategy 2, the resentment inventory. Resentment, the slow burning, grinding kind, is almost always a signal of a values violation. When someone or something is regularly pulling us away from what we care about, the result is a quiet but persistent cost. Here's the skill: learning to read resentment as data rather than just frustration. Make a list of your persistent resentments, not the obvious grievances, the slow burn ones. Then for each one, ask, what value is being violated or neglected here? A chronic irritation about being interrupted at work may point to a value around deep focus or intellectual respect. A persistent resentment about your messy environment may point to a value around calm or beauty. The resentment is not the problem, it is the indicator. What you do with the information it gives you is the work. Strategy 3, the best self-memory scan. Think of 3 to 5 moments in your life when you felt most genuinely yourself. Not happiest, not most successful, most real. They may be oddly specific and mundane. Write down what you were doing, who was there, and what qualities you were expressing in that moment. Hanel and colleagues found in their 2024 research that acting on self-direction values, independence, creativity, autonomy, predicted improved well-being the next day consistently. Your peak experiences are, in essence, moments. Moments when values align occurred naturally. They are maps back to yourself. When you see recurring qualities across multiple memories, when you were present or creative or useful in a specific way, or honest about something hard, those are strong signals of genuine values, not aspirations. Evidence. Strategy 4, the values behavior gap check. Once you have a working values list, do a 1-week behavioral audit. For each value, track one simple question at the end of each day. Did I act in a way that expressed this value today? Not perfectly, just yes or no. At the end of the week, look at the pattern. Where the gaps are consistently largest is where the disconnection lives. Then choose one, just one, specific behavior that closes the gap slightly. One concrete thing you could do today or tomorrow. Research by Gregoire and colleagues found that even small daily increases in values-aligned behavior were associated with reduced distress. The change does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be real, and it needs to happen today, not someday. Strategy 5, the values hierarchy sort. Most of us have multiple values, and they collide. Being completely honest can conflict with being kind. Deep work can conflict with being present for family. These conflicts are not problems to solve once and never face again. They are the recurring texture of a real life. The values hierarchy sort is exactly what it sounds like. Take your values list and using index cards, sticky notes, or just a piece of paper, arrange them in approximate order of importance. The test question for each comparison. If I had to choose between expressing value A or value B in a genuinely hard moment, which would I choose? This is not meant to be permanent. Values can shift across years and life stages. But having a working hierarchy dramatically reduces the cognitive and emotional cost of difficult decisions because the conflict has been pre-thought. When purpose is clear, research shows people are better equipped to navigate challenges and more likely to move toward their lives rather than away from them. Let me close with the science, because I want you to leave today with confidence that these are not ideas I'm pulling from intuition or self-help books. Tunch and colleagues in a 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis in the Journal of Contextual Behavioral Science, reviewed 72 studies and found a medium to large correlation between valued living and reduced depression, and a small to medium correlation with reduced anxiety. What that means for you: living in alignment with your values is one of the most consistent predictors of psychological well-being in the entire research literature. Borham and Schuta, in a 2023 meta-analysis in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, analyzed 99 samples and over 66,000 people and found that purpose in life, the downstream product of values clarity, was substantially associated with lower depression and lower anxiety across both healthy and clinical populations. What that means for you: this is not just relevant when things are falling apart. It is relevant as a baseline feature of a well-lived life. Hennell and colleagues, in a 2024 diary study in the Journal of Personality, followed people across 9 days in 3 countries and found that acting on self-direction values predicted improved well-being the following day, consistently, regardless of culture. What that means for you: the effects are not hypothetical or long-term only. They show up in how you actually feel tomorrow based on what you do today. And Gregoire and colleagues, in a 2021 diary study in the Journal of Contextual Behavioral Science, found that inconsistency in values, aligned behavior, the drift that comes from not knowing or not following your compass, was associated with steeping increases in distress over time. What that means for you: the cost of not doing this work is not neutral. Drift accumulates. Here is what I want you to take away from today. You are not behind. You are not broken for not having figured this out already. Nobody taught most of us how to do this. The goal-setting culture we were raised in is real, and it is powerful, and it is genuinely not enough on its own. What I want you to do this week is exactly one thing, just one. Pick the strategy from today that felt most relevant to you and give it 20 minutes. Not as a solution, as a start. You are allowed to not have this figured out. You are allowed to be in the middle of figuring it out. And if today's video was useful to you, share it with one person you know who is running the goal loop without a compass. They might need to hear that there's a different question to be asking. All the research I referenced today is listed in the description below. These are real studies, real journals, real findings, not concepts invented for content. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the messages you send me. They are why I keep making these videos. You've got this.